I was doing 70 with the windows down, a cigarette biting the corner of my mouth, and a song turned up loud enough to drown out my thoughts. Midnight made the city feel like it belonged to people like me, restless, wired, pretending speed could pass for peace. The road to our place ran quiet and narrow, hedges leaning in like eavesdroppers. 10 more minutes, and I'd be at the gates. The car coughed, lurched, and died. Brilliant, I muttered, coasting to the verge. I turned the key once, twice. Nothing. The dashboard glowed back at me like a bored witness. I should have serviced the thing last week. I should have done a lot of things. I locked up, grabbed my phone, and told myself walking would do me good. I'd been awake for 2 days chasing a contract I didn't land. The rejection still burned behind my ribs. I took 10 steps and froze. Someone was crying. Not a polite cry. Not held in and tidy. The sound came in hiccuping jolts from behind the hedge to my right, like someone trying to breathe through water. I thumbed on my phone light and swept the beam over brambles and blackthorn. Leaves shivered. For a second, there was nothing. My skin prickled anyway. "Hello?" I called into the dark. My voice sounded bigger than I felt. Silence stretched, thin and sticky. "Anyone there?" I told myself I was jumpy because I hadn't slept, because nicotine makes cowards brave and brave men shake. I pushed on. Another 30 paces. Then a scream ripped the lane in two. It wasn't far, up ahead, off to the left, where a gnarled oak hunched beside a field gate. I spun, phone light jittering over bark and shadow. And then she ran straight at me out of the black. We collided. She stumbled backward and fell. I went down with her, palms skidding on grit. When I looked up, the light caught white fabric, gown white, bead white. A wedding dress. She was wearing a bridal skirt, muddy to the knee, a cropped veil torn and hanging like smoke, and trainers so battered they could have been stolen from a ghost. Her hair had fallen out of its pins. Her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying for hours. She was young, beautiful in that startling, wrong-place way beauty sometimes is. For a heartbeat, the hedges and road and night went very, very still. My mother had always nagged, "Come home early, Aiden. That lane is empty after dark." I thought of her voice, then of how ridiculous I was being, grown man spooked by shadows, and dragged myself to my feet. She did too, swaying. When the beam slid down, I saw small cuts on her hands, thorns in her bare ankle above the shoe. She flinched when I moved the light to her face. "Please," she said, "help me." Her voice cracked on the please. She put her hands together under her chin like a prayer. "I don't know you. But for God's sake, help me. Take me anywhere. A shelter, a police station, a women's hostel. I can't be out here when they find me." The lane suddenly felt crowded by dangers I couldn't see. "Who's after you?" I asked. "People who don't stop," she whispered. "People who paid for me to be sold. My stepbrother, he." The words vanished, like she'd run out of breath to spend. I should have called the police. I should have stayed in the lane where the hedges watched, and the moon could tell on me if I did wrong. Instead, in the dark and adrenaline, with her breath a white tremor in the cold, I said the words that changed everything. "You're safe," I told her. "With me." My parents were in Dubai for a week. My mother, Sandra, had given the housekeeper time off. Our guard was at the gate, but I'd texted him earlier to take the night. I swiped the pass at the side entrance and took the girl into the lounge, meaning only to get her water, a blanket, a plan. Her legs gave way as soon as she crossed the threshold. I grabbed the side table jug, sloshed water into a glass, and helped her sit. The cuts on her hands were fresh. The hem of her dress was thorns and dirt. She took the glass, wrists shaking so hard the water ran over the rim, down her throat, and across the neckline of the bodice. I stared and hated myself for staring. I looked away, too late. Shame came fast then, hot and ridiculous. She winced, lifted one foot onto the table, and plucked at the brambles stuck in her heel. "Thank you," she said between breaths. "If I'd stayed there another minute, they would have found me." "Who are you?" I asked stupidly. She blinked like the question surprised her. "Kenzie," she said after a beat softly. "Kenzie." "Right." "Kenzie." I dragged a throw from the arm of the sofa and put it over her shoulders. "You'll be okay?" "We'll figure out." She looked up at me, with eyes full of the kind of trust that isn't earned so much as offered, because there's no choice. And something hard and ugly in me shifted. It was late. My head was a mess. She was, God help me, beautiful. Worse, she was breakable. I took a step toward her I shouldn't have taken. "Please," she said, backing up, palms out. "Don't." What followed, I won't romanticize. I won't dress a wolf in lace and call it a bride. I crossed a line that night. She begged and I didn't listen. There are doors a decent man doesn't open. I opened one. The aftermath was noise gone silent, breath broken into pieces, my own hands shaking when I finally looked at them. For a long time she lay curled and shaking. I sat on the far edge of the bed and stared at the wall, every beat of my heart a hammer against the shame in my ribs. When I found the nerve to look at her again, she had her face turned away from me, hair a curtain, fingers knotted together like a rope. I slept badly and too long. When I woke, pale light cut the room into bands. 10 o'clock blinked at me from the nightstand. I expected the room to be empty, some clumsy mercy delivered while I dreamed. She wasn't gone. She sat on the floor just outside the bedroom door, knees hugged to her chest, eyes swollen until they hardly looked like eyes. When I stepped out, she stood so fast she swayed and caught the wall. "I thought you'd be screaming," I said before I thought. "Or gone." She shook her head. Then she did something that knocked the breath from me. She knelt. "Please," she said, and her voice wasn't like last night's voice. It was scraped raw. "Marry me." "What?" You've already made a husband of yourself." She said it matter-of-factly, like stating a maths answer that solves for X and happens to be the rest of your life. "There's no one else. I don't know anyone here. Please, if you won't help me, don't throw me back. I'll leave, I'll go far. But don't throw me back." I felt something tear inside me. "No," I said, the word too loud. "No. You don't understand what you're asking. My parents, my life. This isn't. We don't even know each other's surnames, for God's sake." "Mine doesn't matter," she said. I don't have one I want to keep." I did what cowards do. I called the guard. "There's a trespasser," I lied. He hesitated. The guard knew me well enough to hear what I wasn't saying, but came. He was gentle as a man can be when the order is wrong, and he knows it. He walked her to the gate while she sobbed and begged softly, as if the volume of her plea might tip a different answer from my mouth. I let it happen. When the silence rushed back, it took the room with it. I stood staring at the door until my legs shook, then showered until my skin felt like it might give way. My father Basil called from Dubai an hour later, booming, affectionate, full of business and sunshine. I lied like it was easy. Then I went to the office and worked until midnight like a penance. Sleep didn't want me after that. When it did come, it brought her with it. Kenzie on the road, Kenzie in the hedge, Kenzie crying on the bedroom carpet, Kenzie with her hands knotted in prayer. Awake, she was worse. She was everywhere, in the empty chair across the breakfast table, in the way the hall light made a pale strip on the floor where she'd sat, in the ache that settled under my collarbone like a second heartbeat. I looked for her. I didn't admit it to anyone, not even to myself at first, but I looked. At shelters, on corners, in faces that weren't hers. My mate Leo drove with me at night sometimes, following rumors I invented from nothing, and never asked why. I slept less, smoked more, worked like I could outpace the regret. Nothing. For weeks, nothing. So I did the easiest, hardest thing. I ran. Dubai took me in like an ocean takes a stone. I drowned myself in work. A partnership offer landed. I said yes and didn't look back. Emails turned into meetings, turned into contracts. I was good at the grind and better at pretending it fed me. My mother begged me to come home. My father's health began to wobble and steady, wobble and steady. I said I was busy. It was true. 3 years blurred. I built a life that didn't need sleeping well. People said I looked successful. I felt like a house with a lovely front door and nothing behind it but wind. When the call came that dragged me back, it was from my mother, sobbing. "Your father," she said. "Heart. Come home, Aiden. Please, I was on the next flight." Seeing my mother at the door near broke me. She'd always been steel wrapped in silk. Now the steel showed. My father was thinner, paler, abruptly old in a way that made me wish I'd paid attention to time. I kissed his cheek and told him he'd terrify the doctors out of their gloom. He laughed, because he is a man who refuses to scare. That evening, Mum sat me down with tea and determination. "Aiden," she said gently, "we want to see you happy. We want to see you settled. Your father's health isn't what it was. Let us have the joy of knowing you're not alone. My friend Maureen's daughter." I didn't hear the rest. The world had narrowed to the memory of a girl kneeling by a door, saying, "Marry me," with her eyes swollen and her voice thin as thread. I muttered something, stood, grabbed my keys, and drove like a coward to the lane where I'd found her 3 years ago, as if she might be there waiting like a story that pauses politely between chapters. She wasn't, of course. She never was when I looked for her. Mum had made a tableful of my favorites for dinner. Curries that reminded me of childhood, rice that smelled like buttered rain. Our gatekeeper, Asher's wife, had helped, along with their daughter, a quiet, efficient girl who worked mostly in the kitchen and retired early to the staff quarters because her mother was nervous in the dark. Her name was Kenzie. I didn't know it. Not yet. I barely tasted the food. I excused myself early and pretended sleep. In the morning, fever laid me out like a reprimand. Mum fussed, called the doctor, pressed cool cloths to my forehead with the same hands that had bandaged skinned knees. My father sat by my bed and told me jokes until my laugh cracked open, something like a promise. "Stay," he said, when the fever eased. "Run the business here. We'll sell the Dubai shares if we have to. And get married, son. Give your mother her wish. Not now," I said too quickly. "No," Mum cut in, shooting him a look. "Not now." First get well, a week later, I could stand without seeing stars. Mum took Asher's daughter to the supermarket herself. She knows the brands I like, I heard her say, and came home rattled. I think someone followed us, she told Dad, half laughing at her own paranoia. It's silly, I know. But I didn't like the way they looked at her. The next day, Asher's wife fell ill and was admitted to hospital for observation. Their daughter went with her in the evenings and came back before full dark because the staff quarters made her mother nervous at night. Mum sang her praises daily. Such a good girl, Aiden. So careful. So kind. A week after that, Asher came into the drawing room, white-faced, hands shaking so badly the tea tray rattled. Madam, Sir, Miss Kenzie, his voice broke. She's gone. 2 men took her from the market. I tried to run, but my mother's face emptied of color. What do you mean took? She whispered. Shoved her into a car. He swallowed. She screamed. Something inside me understood before the facts arrived. The room tilted. Sound thinned into a whistle. Mum grabbed her phone and the car keys at once, yelling for the driver. I was already moving. We searched streets and asked shopkeepers and begged Luck to remember us. Luck wasn't home. Back at the house, Asher's wife had returned from hospital and was weeping into the hem of her shawl. We have no enemies, she kept repeating. We have nothing anyone would want. The girl, she said finally, lifting her head, eyes blazing with the sort of fury that only love makes. Her enemies found her. Her stepbrother. He sold her once. He'd sell her again. My mother stared. Stepbrother? She looked from one to the other, confused. Asher, I thought she was your... She is, he said quickly, because I made her so. But not by blood. And then he told us everything. 3 years ago, an unknown girl had sat outside our bedroom corridor all day, weeping. The guard had ignored his orders and knocked on the staff door. Asher had taken her in out of pity, told his wife, Lila, that their own daughter had come from the village to help for a few months. She was broken, he said simply, a month before she smiled without apologizing for it. Her name, he told us, was Kenzie. She had run from a stepbrother who had gambled her away to a man old enough to be her grandfather. She had run in a wedding dress because binding her life to a stranger had been the price of someone else's debt. She had been found in a lane by a man who offered help. And then, here he looked down, and I looked at the floor too, because shame has a weight you recognize even when no one lifts it to show you what it is, had turned her out when she begged for the kind of safety paper makes. She begged me not to tell you, Asher said softly. She was afraid. Of you, of men. But 3 days ago in the supermarket, she told Madam she thought she saw her stepbrother. I told her we'd keep her safe. I was wrong. I sat down because my knees stopped believing in me. Mum sat beside me, slid her hand into mine the way she had when I was 5 and storms were too loud. Aiden, she said, whispering my name like it might float if she said it gently enough. I went to my father. We have to find her, I said uselessly. We will, he answered, already on the phone to the chief inspector. Connections can be ugly until you need them. That night, I loved every thread my father had ever woven. Within hours, police raided a rented house on the edge of the city. They found Kenzie with ink on her fingers and bruises blooming along her arm where someone had forced her hand to a contract. They found her stepbrother raging. They found a rich old man so corrupt he wore his entitlement like cologne. The old man paid bail before the ink on his statement was dry. The stepbrother did not. When they brought Kenzie home, Lila howled and held her like a mother holds a child in a flood. My mother went very quiet and very still, which is how she gets when something matters beyond language. She took Kenzie's face in her hands and said, "You're safe now," in the exact tone I should have used 3 years ago. I stood in the doorway and watched the girl I'd spent nights hunting in my head step into our hall like she belonged there. She was thinner, older, stronger in the way people get when they've had to be. When her eyes found me, they flinched and steadied. I dropped to my knees without planning to. "I am sorry," I said, because there was nothing else I could say that meant anything. "I'm sorry in ways I don't have words for. If there is a version of the world in which I can undo what I did, I will spend the rest of my life trying to find it." She didn't speak. Tears slipped soundlessly down to her jaw. Asher guided her gently toward the staff door, the place that had been safe when the rest of the world wasn't. That night, I told my parents the truth. All of it. My mother cried. Not from shock, I think, but from the miserable relief of understanding what had chewed her son hollow. My father stood very straight and said, "We will fix what we can, and we will carry what we can't." He started with the law. The stepbrother stayed in remand. The old man oozed away on bail and influence like a slug in silk. The world isn't fair. That day, we forced it to lean a little in our direction anyway. A week later, Asher came to us with news that made my mother gasp. Kenzie, he corrected himself, half smiling at the habit, is engaged. We arranged it months ago. A decent family, a decent man. They were meant to do the ceremony next week. We thought it safest. He swallowed. We thought she deserved an ordinary life. Of course she did. Of course it felt like a cage to me. I slept badly. I prayed badly. I stood at the window of the room that had once held the worst version of me and asked the night for courage. The engagement day came silken and sunny. Mum filled the garden with bunting and marigolds. Lila cried at everything. Asher went around thanking people for attending as if the party were for him. I stayed out of sight, coward that I am, and watched through the window when the groom's party arrived. He looked fine. A good man, I told myself savagely. Better than you. The registrar cleared his throat and opened his book. A woman ran in from the gate, cheeks flushed, hair slipping its pins. "Stop!" she shouted. "You can't do this!" The garden froze. She fumbled in her bag, hauled out a document. "He can't marry her. He married me last month in secret. He promised to make it official after his sister's wedding. We have a certificate." The groom went white, then red. His parents sputtered. Lila made a sound like the end of the world and clung to Asher, who looked like someone had removed his bones. Kenzie stood as if wind might take her if she moved. I heard my voice before I decided to use it. "Read," I said to the registrar. He glanced at the certificate, then at the groom, then at the room, and closed his book. I walked out into the garden, every eye await. The groom's family protested. My father cut through their noise with a raised hand. "You will leave," he said calmly to the man and his parents. "Immediately." They did, with some help from our staff. I turned to the registrar again and found my mother's eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. There are moments in a life when 1,000 small decisions line up like dominoes, and you are the finger that starts them falling. I faced Kenzie and lowered myself to one knee, not because romance demanded it, but because what I had to ask warranted the humility of the ground. I can't erase the worst night of our lives, I said, but I can spend the rest of mine making sure no one ever touches you without your yes. Marry me, only if you want to, only if you believe I can be better than the boy I was. Silence stretched. The garden held its breath. Kenzie looked down at her hands, at Lila, at Asher, at my mother's face wet with tears. When she looked back at me, I saw anger and hurt, and, impossibly, some fragile thread of something that might be hope, if you warmed it in your hands long enough. Yes, she said, and the registrar, God bless the man, opened his book. My mother wept openly. My father stood behind the registrar like a bodyguard in a painting. Asher sobbed into Lila Tew's shoulder. I said the words and meant them with everything in me. Kenzie's voice shook, but she said yes all the same. The ink looked ordinary and monumental at once. Later, when the house had taken in the shock and turned it into laughter and music and the clink of 2 full glasses, I found Kenzie sitting on the edge of the bed in the room that used to hold shame like a smell. She wore a simple dress because there hadn't been time for anything else. Her hair was a dark river over her shoulder. She held her hands together in her lap like she couldn't believe they were hers. I knocked because that mattered now. May I come in? She nodded. I sat across from her and didn't reach, because that mattered too. Thank you, I said, for trusting me with another chance I didn't deserve. She looked at me for a long time. I forgave you, she said quietly, a long while ago. It was the only way I could carry it without breaking. I swallowed. I'm still learning how to forgive me. Good, she said, surprising a laugh from both of us. It'll keep you honest. We talked. About small things at first. The garden lights my mother liked, the way Rosie from the country house made tea like medicine, the list of groceries we forgot to buy. Then bigger things, what frightened us, what we wanted, what we'd never told anyone because language sometimes makes truths too real. I told her about Dubai and the sleeping that wasn't sleep. She told me about the hostel kitchens and the few women who'd become her army when she had needed one. When I finally moved to sit beside her, I did it slowly. When I finally took her hand, I asked first. When I kissed her, it felt like prayer without words. I won't write the rest for anyone but us. Some stories get better when they're only ours. The days after were ordinary in the best sense. We were clumsy and sweet and shy in turns. My mother fussed over Kenzie as if God had finally sent her the daughter she'd always wanted. My father taught her to cheat at cards and then accused her of cheating better than he did. Asher Esprit. And Lila called her our girl with pride. I went to work and came home like a man who knows what home is for. We had shadows. Of course we did. Trauma doesn't leave because you ask politely. Sometimes Kenzie woke with a start, and I kept my hands on the mattress where she could see them until her breath slowed. Sometimes a scent or a song sent me back to a lane and a decision I can't unmake. We learned the choreography of each other's ghosts, but we also learned the choreography of each other's joy. We learned how to build a life under light. We planted herbs that refused to die. We burnt the first batch of pancakes and ate them anyway because we were ridiculous and hungry. We fought about nonsense and apologized badly and got better at both. We caught each other looking across rooms full of people and smiled like thieves who'd gotten away with the best kind of crime. People asked for our beginning, and we gave them a version that told the truth without opening wounds to weather. We met by chance. We married by choice. We are still learning the language of yes. Sometimes I catch Kenzie staring out the window at dusk, and I know she's talking to the girl who ran in trainers through hedges with a wedding dress around her legs. I want to tell that girl thank you for running, for knocking, for trusting the wrong man once and then trusting him again when he tried to make it right, for surviving long enough to recognize love when it stopped running and waited. On some evenings, when Cold Harbor Lane goes quiet and the hedges lean in like old gossips, Kenzie and I walk hand in hand past the spot where she ran into me and changed the shape of my life. The lane is just a lane again. The house beyond it is full of noise and love, and lists stuck to the fridge with magnets. My parents sit under the pergola arguing about birds. Asher complains that the herbs are too wild, but refuses to cut them back. Lila brings out a pie she insists is overdone and is, as always, perfect. I stub out my cigarettes more often than I light them now. I still drive too fast sometimes, but never down that lane. When I do play music loud, Kenzie turns it down with a look that says, "Be present," and I am. If you'd asked me years ago what I wanted, I would have given you numbers and geographies. If you ask me now, the list is shorter, simpler, and I keep it in my pocket like a talisman. Her hand, my mother's laugh, my father's terrible jokes, a table loud with friends. The knowledge that the worst night of my life is not the truest thing about me. The truest thing is this: I was a man who broke something. I am a man who chose to spend his days mending. And the woman I love, God bless her impossible heart, let me try. When I think of the night our car died and the road went quiet, I don't hear the song on the radio anymore. I hear Kenzie's voice in the dark saying please. I hear mine, flawed but learning, answer, "You're safe with me. This time I keep the promise."